Dust, smoke, broken arrows, burning chariots, dead horses, and dead men. It was the 17th day of the war, and on this day, the cries of the wounded mingled with the shouts of the living. Duryodhana had placed Karna in command of all of his armies, and in a chariot as resplendent as the sun in the sky, Karna rode out onto the battlefield. And on this day, he sought out Yudhishthira, their chariots circling one another, the arrows flying between them, embedding themselves in the wood of those chariots. And Karna shot an arrow which severed Yudhishthira's bowstring. And as Yudhishthira struggled to restring his bow, Karna reached for a great spear with a blunt tip, and he hurled it through the air. And it struck Yudhishthira square in the chest, and it drove him off of his chariot and to the ground. And Karna leapt from his chariot, sword in hand. And Yudhishthira leapt up, and their swords clanged in the bright air. And then, with a spiraling move, which Karna had learned from the hermit Parashurama in the desert, he sent Yudhishthira's sword flying uselessly away. Karna approached Yudhishthira, his sword drawn. He held his sword at Yudhishthira's trembling neck. And Karna said, "Do not fear, king of the world, do not fear. For I will spare you today, because of a promise I have made to your mother. But tomorrow, and every day after, remember that your life is my gift to you. Now run, king of the world, run!" So Yudhishthira sprang up and ran away. Karna mounted his chariot, and now he sought out Bhima. And the arrows flew between them as well. And the dust went up, and their chariots circled one another. And then Karna shot 2 arrows, one into the heads of each of Bhima's horses. And in their death throes they went galloping wildly away. So Bhima leapt from his chariot into the ground, and stood there, thumping his great club against the earth. And Karna leapt from his chariot, and he shot a single, diamond-pointed arrow at that club, and shattered it into 3 pieces. And then he called an astra of live snakes out of the air, and these snakes went hissing and spitting through the air, and wrapped themselves around Bhima's arms, and wrapped themselves around Bhima's legs, and dragged him to the ground. Karna stood over him with his sword at his chest, and he said, "Do not fear, strong man, do not fear. For I will spare you today, because of a promise I have made to your mother. But tomorrow, and every day after, remember that your life is my gift to you. Now run, strong man, run!" So Bhima sprang up and ran away. With Nakula and Sahadeva, it was the same. Karna beat them all, until there was only Arjuna. And their chariots circled one another, and the arrows flew between them. It was a moment that had been prepared for years ago, when their eyes first met in the arena outside Hastinapura. And they each called astras down out of the air, and fire and ice and stone and chunks of iron went flying between them. But each spell was counteracted by another. And then Karna shot an arrow, which severed Arjuna's bowstring. And as he worked to re-string it, Karna shot an arrow, with the head of a snake on the end of it, an arrow loaded with all the poison of the king of the snakes himself. And he shot this arrow straight at Arjuna, and it whistled through the air. But just before it struck Arjuna's chest, Krishna leapt up and came crashing down on the chariot, so that it dipped down into the earth. And the arrow hit not Arjuna's chest, but the crown on his head, and sent it smoking and steaming in 3 pieces to the ground. And Arjuna restrung his bow, and the arrows flew between them, and then Karna's chariot wheel got stuck in the mud. He leapt from his chariot to free the wheel from the mud. Arjuna had an arrow pointed right at Karna's chest, but he hesitated. "Why do you hesitate?" said Krishna. "Kill him now. This is your chance." "It would be against Dharma to kill him now," said Arjuna. "It would be dishonorable and against the rules of war." And Krishna said, "Where was Dharma when Draupadi was dragged by the hair? Where was Dharma when the kingdom was stolen from you and your brothers in a dice game? Kill him now. You will get no other chance. For this is the earth itself crying out. The great Mother Earth, she wants this conflict to end." And Karna looked at Arjuna and said, "Arjuna, if you strike me down, I shall die as warriors die. But you will live on as a weak man who has won victory from fate only by a trick. For you are nothing but the toy of Krishna." And with that, Arjuna let his arrow go. Kale Durgema, Kalima, Jema, Durgema, Jema, The sun was red in the sky at the end of that day, when they brought Karna's body from the battlefield to the camp of the Kurus. The sun was red in the sky, as all the soldiers gathered, silent or weeping, in crowds around his body. The sun was red in the sky, as Duryodhana, with a face of stone, walked through that crowd. The sun was red in the sky, as Duryodhana knelt down beside the body of his friend Karna. The sun was red in the sky, as he placed his head down on his chest and wept. The next day, the fighting continued, with Duryodhana alone leading his armies against the Pandavas. And on this day, Bhima and Dushasana fought each other from their chariots, the arrows flying between them, until finally Bhima shot 2 arrows into the heads of Dushasana's horses, and they went careening wildly away into the very camp of the Pandavas. And there Dushasana leapt from his chariot, brandishing his club. And Bhima did the same, pounding the earth with his club. "Come, let us fight," said Bhima. And they fought with their clubs for a long time, until their clubs shattered, and they fought with their bare hands. And finally Bhima wrestled Dushasana to the ground. "Help!" cried Dushasana. "Help! Karna! Anyone!" "Karna cannot help you now," said Bhima. "I myself shall be like time, the finisher. I shall end this." And as Dushasana shrieked, Bhima tore open his belly, and he died. And Bhima bent down and drank his blood like a lion. "Ah," cried Bhima, "this blood is a taste sweeter than honey, sweeter than mother's milk, sweeter even than the elixir of the gods. Draupadi, do you hear? Come, it is finished. Draupadi, come." Draupadi heard, and she left her tent in the camp of the Pandavas and came walking towards Bhima. "Do you remember?" cried Bhima. "Do you remember how he dragged you by the hair in front of everyone? Do you remember that day?" When she saw Dushasana's body, she began to weep. Slowly she walked towards it, and then she knelt down beside Dushasana's body, as though she were about to pray. And then she bent her head down and slicked her long black hair over his body. And a moment later she lifted her head and tied her hair up, as her mother had shown her how to do when she was a girl. "I remember, Bhima," she said. "I remember." And she stood up, trembling, and walked from Dushasana's body, the blood dripping down her long black hair, dripping down her back and to the ground. And by late afternoon of that day, all the soldiers in Duryodhana's armies either surrendered or were killed or were driven away. But Duryodhana himself could not be found. In their chariots the Pandavas searched the battlefield. Everywhere they looked, they saw dead soldiers, broken chariots, wheels in the mud, dead horses, dying elephants, carnage and destruction. Finally they came to the camp of the Kurus, and they walked between the tents and the abandoned campfires, but still Duryodhana could not be found. And then at last, thirsty and worn out, they went to a small lake in the camp of the Kurus, and they bent down to drink. But as they did so, Nakula spoke. "Look, there he is!" And they all looked, and they saw, under the clear water, Duryodhana sitting. His eyes closed, his breathing made still, sitting at the bottom of the lake. "Come out of there," said Yudhishthira. "Come out, do not hide." And a voice came up from the depths and said, "I do not hide. I have become a man of fire, burning with anger, and so I have sought out the water. And now, what? Will you all finish me, all of you together, ganging up on me? Is that the way you follow Dharma?" "No," said Yudhishthira. "But it is how you killed Abhimanyu, 6 of you crowding around him, 6 seasoned warriors killing a soldier who was no more than a boy. We will not finish you off in such a way, but you must pay for what you have done. Come out of the water and choose one of us to fight. If you win, we shall give you your kingdom back. If you lose, you shall pay the price." A voice came up from the water. "I choose Bhima," said the voice. And then suddenly Duryodhana leapt out of the water and stood on the bank, thumping his club against the ground, water dripping down from his hair and his face down his body. "Come, Bhima," he said, "come. I am full of life. Let us see who is the stronger one." Bhima looked at him, and he groaned slightly. "My brothers," he said, "I am very tired." "You can do this," said Arjuna. "Remember all the evil he has done." "Yes," said Bhima, "I will do it." So Yudhishthira drew a circle in the sand with his foot, and Bhima and Duryodhana stepped into it with their clubs. And Duryodhana began to pound the ground with his club. "Come, strong man, come. I remember putting a snake in your bed so many years ago. Well, it has come to this. Let us see who is the greater warrior." And shouting, the 2 of them began to hammer upon each other, pummeling each other with their clubs. But Bhima was very tired, and soon Duryodhana hit him a tremendous blow in the side, and Bhima went sprawling to the ground. "Ha!" said Duryodhana, and Bhima crawled to the edge of the circle, towards his brothers and to Krishna, and he said, "I am very tired, I am very tired." "Come, strong man, come," said Duryodhana, and Krishna said, "Hit him in the legs. It is the only way." "What?" said Bhima. "It is against all the rules of war." "Hit him in the legs. Where were the rules of war when he dragged Draupadi by the hair? Where were the rules of war when he stole your kingdom from you in a dice game? This is your only chance. Hit him in the legs." And Bhima staggered up, took hold of his club, and gave a great cry. "Gah!" And he ran towards Duryodhana, and wham! He hit him in the thigh, and Duryodhana went falling to the ground. "Gah! You coward!" he said. "You coward! That was a low blow, and you know it. That was against all the rules of war. Krishna, I see you counseling them. All of this is your fault. All of the evil in the world comes from you. Truly, you have a mouth of fire. You devour the world. You have done nothing but cheat, lie, and steal. There is nothing good in this world left because of you." Krishna stood up, and he walked towards Duryodhana, raging, bleeding to death in the sand. And Krishna said, "I have fought terrible powers. I have saved what I have been able to save." "You have saved nothing," said Duryodhana. "You have ruined everything." And then Duryodhana said, "Yudhishthira, you inherit a kingdom of sorrow, of ashes, and of lies. I die happy, having known many years of happiness ruling my kingdom. I have died as a king should die, defending his realm. I go in happiness to the other world, to be welcomed by my friends who are waiting there for me. You inherit an ashen land, a broken place with nothing good left in it. You inherit a world of sorrow." And Yudhishthira said, "Duryodhana, you have done terrible things, and you have reaped your reward. We take our leave." And with that, Yudhishthira, his brothers, and Krishna left. They left Duryodhana there, bleeding to death in the sand, as the sun went down and darkness settled around him. So they rode in their chariots away into the darkness. But they did not ride all the way back to their camp. Instead, they stopped at a large banyan tree at the edge of the camp of the Kurus. "We are very tired," said Yudhishthira. "Let us rest here for the night." And so they got out of their chariots, all of them except for Arjuna. For it was the custom in this time that the chariot driver should leave the chariot first, and Krishna stubbornly refused to leave the chariot. "Krishna," said Arjuna, "what is this? What is this insult to me? I have fought a great battle, I have done well, and now you insist on me leaving the chariot first?" "Arjuna," said Krishna, "I speak as your driver, I speak as your friend. This once, give up all custom, and leave the chariot first. It is a small dishonor, but you are strong enough to take it." Arjuna looked at Krishna, and then he gave a little laugh. "All right, Krishna, have it your way." And Arjuna stepped from the chariot, and Krishna dropped the reins and did the same. And as soon as Krishna's feet reached the ground, as soon as he was standing on the earth, Arjuna's chariot burst into flames. "What is this?" said Arjuna. "Drona," said Krishna. "Drona destroyed your chariot many times during the war. Nothing has held it together but my powers. If you had let me get off the chariot first, you would have been burned alive in this chariot. So I waited to protect you." Arjuna bowed down before Krishna. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you, Krishna. Thank you, my teacher." So Arjuna's chariot burned and smoldered all that night until there was nothing left of it but ash. And far off in the darkness, Duryodhana lay, bleeding to death in the sand. And as he lay there, he remembered the palace of Hastinapura, remembered its many beautiful halls and rooms, remembered the reflecting pool in the garden of that palace, and the great towering banyan tree above it that was often filled with the songs of birds. He remembered the throne room. He remembered laughter and sorrow, and the feeling of holding the entire world like a ripe fruit in your hand. And as he remembered these things, he heard footsteps approaching. "Who's that?" he said. "Who is there?" "It is I," said a voice, "Ashwataman, the son of Drona." "You are alive," said Duryodhana. "Yes, there is life in me, and with that life I have done a great deed." And Ashwataman sat down beside Duryodhana in the sand. "I tell you this," said Ashwataman. "I crept in the darkness silently into the camp of the Pandavas, armed only with a dagger. And in the darkness I found every sleeping warrior, and I blotted out his life. I smothered them, I gouged them, I gashed, I did everything. I killed every soldier I could find." "Good," said Duryodhana, "good." "I tell you," said Ashwataman, "Yudhishthira has no soldiers left, no armies. I have killed them all." "Excellent," said Duryodhana, "excellent. My friend, I die happy, knowing I have defended my realm. Thank you for these news. You have done a good thing. I die happy." And his voice trailed off, and his eyes closed, and he died. And the Pandavas, they were sleeping soundly at the edge of the camp of the Kurus, when a man came running, a single soldier, and he cried out, "Help, help, terrible things!" And they awoke, and Yudhishthira said, "What has happened?" And the man told them everything, told them how Ashwataman had come in the darkness and killed every sleeping warrior he could find. "There's hardly anyone left," said the man, "hardly anyone at all." And Arjuna said, "Ashwataman, we must find him, we must track him down, even in darkness, here and now." So, filled with anger, they set out, and Draupadi went with them, through the darkness, and Nakula and Sahadeva, tracked Ashwataman's footprints through the night. And where had Ashwataman gone? Well, he came to me, to Vyasa, the teller of this story. For I was sitting in contemplation in the long grasses beside the sacred river Ganges, sitting in darkness, when I heard him come out of the night. And he said, Vyasa, you, the teller of this story, man with the oceanic mind, clever singer of stories, please help me, hide me, protect me. The Pandavas are out to get me, for I have done terrible things. Tell me, is there a way out of your poem? There is no way out of my poem, I told him. For my poem is the world, every worm and wheel, every shadow and star. Everything there is in this poem, and what is not in this poem is nowhere. Then can you hide me, protect me from their anger in some way, for I have done terrible things? Ashwataman, as men act, so they become. This is the eternal law. For this reason, no one can protect you from what you have done. And furthermore, you should know by now that my poem of the world contains much suffering, and from this poem there is no escape. But you have written everything. You decide everything. There must be some way. There is none. For look, here they come. So Ashwataman went crouching away into the shadows as the 5 Pandavas, Draupadi and Krishna, came walking down to the river with torches in their hands. Vyasa, Draupadi said, you who are writing our stories, tell me, where is that killer of men, the one who struck in darkness, destroying all our hopes? For his tracks have led us here. I am here, said Ashwataman, stepping out of the shadows. I will not run from you any more. In fact, I have decided that we all shall die together. What do you mean? Said Yudhishthira. Ashwataman laughed and plucked a blade of grass from the ground. I possess a weapon that will destroy your entire kingdom and everything in it, including us here by the river, including even Vyasa, the composer of this poem of life in which we walk. It is not a weapon of metal or of stone, but of thought. It can be summoned by means of an arrow or a spear, but also through a simple, everyday object, such as a stone or a blade of grass. Pashupata, said Arjuna. Yes, that is the weapon, and I release it now. He held the blade of grass between his hands, and suddenly he breathed out forcefully and released the weapon. Whew! What has happened? Said Draupadi. What has he done? Nothing, said Bhima. He has done nothing at all. The sky says otherwise, said Vyasa. Look, already the sky has become bright, though dawn is hours away. Look, 1,000 suns are descending to earth in a great sheet of flame. They looked up to see that it was true. Quick, Yudhishthira said. Arjuna, you have this weapon also, given to you by Shiva. Release it and counteract this blazing death falling down upon us. Without a word, Arjuna took an arrow and fired it into the sky, speaking the words given to him by Shiva as it flew up into the sky, bursting into flame. No, cried Krishna. One weapon alone would have drowned this kingdom in fire, but 2 together will destroy the earth, returning all creation to the ash and darkness in which it began. You both must call your weapons back. But I don't know how, said Ashwataman. As he spoke, the sky crackled, and charred birds began to fall out of the sky. Arjuna closed his eyes, putting all his attention inwards, and slowly he called his weapon back. Ashwataman, Krishna yelled, call the weapon back! A black wind began to rise around them. Look out, cried Bhima, as a great cloud of smoke blew over them. Coughing and gasping, they clung to the ground. The river was churned white by the wind, the trees roaring. Far off a tree burst into flame, and then another. If you cannot call your weapon back, said Krishna, then divert it, send it somewhere else, anywhere. Ashwataman closed his eyes and held his palms together, speaking words no one could hear. Suddenly, the wind stopped, and the smoke cleared. The sky faded to orange, then to yellow, and then to the darkness of night, and they could see the stars. They all stood up. And then, suddenly, Draupadi clutched her belly, crying out in pain. But it was not only Draupadi. For far away, in a distant village, a woman drawing water from a well did the same. And so did a princess in a palace at the desert's edge. In fact, every woman of childbearing age in the kingdom of the Pandavas doubled over at one and the same time, each of them feeling a blue spark of hurt entering her body to burn out but to leave a scar. "What have you done?" said Yudhishthira. "Ashwatthama, tell us, what have you done?" "I have brought sterility to every woman in your kingdom," Ashwatthama said. "Yudhishthira, your story ends here. For you have conquered a country, but it shall be a country without children, without a future." "Ashwatthama, I curse you," said Krishna, "for you have committed a crime not simply against the living, but against the unborn. I declare, for 3,000 years you shall wander this earth as nothing but a mournful wind, utterly alone, rejected by everyone, mournful, whispering away in the corners of this world." And he snapped his fingers, and Ashwatthama turned into nothing but smoke, gray smoke that went mournfully away up, howling into the trees, whispering and howling, and then it scattered and was gone. And the next day, a woman in a blue sari, wearing green earrings, walked out onto the battlefield, looking for her dead husband. And behind her came a young man, scarcely older than a boy, looking for his brother. And behind him came a grandmother, leading a small child by the hand, a grandmother looking for her son. And behind them came thousands more, all of them seeking their loved ones, seeking soldiers and chariot drivers, seeking tamers of elephants, tamers of horses, cooks, craftsmen, seeking all who had died in the war. And on that hazy battlefield, they found broken spears, broken swords, broken shields. They found dead horses, bristling with ravens, tearing their lifeless bodies apart. They found chariots still burning in the morning air. And they found dead soldiers. And when the woman in the blue sari found the body of her husband, identifying it by the ring on his finger which she had given him years before, she let out a great cry, and she fell to the ground weeping. And when the young man, only a little older than a boy, found the body of his older brother, crushed beneath a chariot wheel, he wept and he cried. And when the grandmother, leading the small child by the hand, found the body of her son dead on the battlefield, she covered the little girl's eyes and she wept. So the cries went up into the air, cries of thousands of women finding their dead loved ones. And their cries went up from the battlefield like smoke from a fire, like thousands of bright birds released into the air, birds who would find no home, birds who had no roosting place, whose only home was their flying. So the wailing filled the air. And then, one by one, they began to burn the bodies. And fire, the hungry god, took each of the bodies and transformed it into smoke and ash and into light. And the sun was red in the sky, shining down through clouds the color of dried blood. And towards the end of the day, they went, one by one, towards the river, the sacred river Ganges. And the woman in the blue sari took fresh water and offered it to the river, and she wept, and still the river flowed past. And the boy offered water to the river for his older brother, and still the river flowed past. And the grandmother showed the little child, the little girl, how to offer water to the river as well, and still the river flowed past. And Yudhishthira offered water to the river, and Arjuna walked into the stream of that river, weeping, and still the river flowed past. Thousands came to that river, crying, weeping, making offering to the water, and still the river flowed past. And when Yudhishthira walked back to the shore, he found Kunti standing there. "Mother," he said. "My son," she said, "it has been a long time. I must speak with you, with all your brothers, Draupadi too." So Yudhishthira gathered them all, Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, Sahadeva, and Draupadi. And Kunti said, "Karna was your brother. I gave birth to him long, long ago, when I was really no more than a girl. By divine intervention, the sun god was his father. But I was ashamed, embarrassed, so I put him in a reed basket and set him adrift in the river. I watched as he floated away. I told him later he knew this to be true, but he did not want to share it out of loyalty to Duryodhana, who had been his good friend. So I have come to tell this to you. Karna was your brother." Yudhishthira cried out, "Oh, mother! Oh, mother! Why did you not say so? Why did you keep this a secret for so long? It could have changed everything. You've drowned us in blood and suffering. If we'd known, perhaps there would have been no war. We would have accepted him, our brother, our brother." He went crying to the water. And Arjuna took a step and then another towards the river. And then he fell down to the ground and beat the ground with his fists until he began to weep. And Draupadi looked off, stone-faced, into the distance, and then tears began to trickle down her cheeks. And Nakula and Sahadeva and Bhima all wept by the side of that river. And then Yudhishthira poured a little fresh water into his hands and offered it to the river in honor of his brother Karna. Jai Jai Ma Kali Durga, Jai Jai Ma Kali Thank you for joining me. Thank you for attending to this story, giving it your attention, which is a kind of offering. We listen to the story, we take part in it, we are a part of it. It is happening with us, in it, around us. I invite you to make a little offering to this story. I invite you to do that. Breath is a good one. Just give some breath up to this story. Send it out to this being, this animal of breath, this chandelier of shadows which has come to us to lighten or darken our days. This is a brutal part of this story. Holy cow. Well, it is a war after all. I don't like the brutality, but I like that it is there. It's in the spectrum of this story. I like that it kind of grosses me out, freaks me out. I think that's a good thing, because it's not all safe. It's disgusting. It's horrible. How Dushasana dies, for example. And it's all the fighting. Oh, man, good grief. Stop, will you? Stop that stuff. And the question rises, for me anyway, of what good is it? I mean, this story, which in this part of itself is just bang, bang, boom, well, not just, has a lot of slugging it out. How is that different from things we see on a screen, things we see on whatever, Netflix or whatever? And I would have a couple answers to that. One is, just right from the get-go, the form makes it different. This isn't something you're being subjected to. It's something you are a part of. You're participating in it because you imagine this. You have to conjure these images up. Even though I'm saying them, what you see is what you see, and it's not like what anybody else sees. A film just gives you its thing. It's the same no matter who you are. This story is different depending on who you are. Check it out. This story is different depending on who you are. If you're old, young, male, female, whatever, a dentist, a doctor, a craftsman, if you ate milk for breakfast, whatever, whoever you are, we're all different. And so this story becomes different as well in us. So that is already a liberating thing. And then it is a story seen as sacred by millions of people, which is something to think about. And also, it includes grief. It includes sorrow in a way that, well, most whatever big action kind of movie things I've seen do not. The section with the women arriving on the battlefield, in the original it's just called The Women, because the women just show up, and it's quite lengthy. It's a long part of the story. I've condensed it, just like I've condensed the battle scenes, but it's a major part of this story. It's not just something tacked on. This outpouring of grief is real, and it's articulated in the original, quote unquote, as much as this story has an original, as much as any story has an original. So that is helpful to me. It's satisfying that it's there. As a performer, I just can't sustain that anger for too long that is necessary for some of these battle scenes. So just speaking in that way, it's good to have the sorrow, the quiet, which are in this story as well. And then these battle scenes, these moments of action, are the fulfillment of character. They lead, they're the culmination of the characters involved. Karna, who fights so well, that's a part of who he is. He does things well. He's an honorable man. He does not seek to destroy or tear down the world so much. I mean, he's fighting, killing people, obviously, but he is he's doing things well, and that seems to me to be part of his character. And he gets a raw deal. Man, Krishna just tricking him every way. The way Krishna jumps on the chariot of Arjuna so that this snake-headed arrow Karna has shot perfectly misses its target, and instead destroys this golden diadem given to Arjuna by Indra, king of the gods. Karna should have won, I mean, that's how it feels. And is he more honorable than the quote-unquote heroes? That's another thing you do not see in action movies, so-called, is this questioning of good and evil. Good is just good and evil's evil in a lot of stories that we tell, but in this one, it really pushes it. Karna does not cheat, and he just shoots arrows perfectly at their targets. Arjuna, it could be argued, cheats. Karna's chariot is stuck in the mud. And Krishna says this is the mother crying out. This is the great mother herself crying out to end this battle. Well, is that true? Or is it just a line, as we might say? Just a PR job? You could take that position and say, Krishna's just, I don't know, he's just doing the worst things. And then Bhima, exhausted, fighting Duryodhana, same thing. He only wins by cheating, by hitting him in the thigh, which is an illegal move in this story, in this myth world. Duryodhana obeys the rules. Karna obeys the rules. The Pandavas do not. What does that mean? That the good ones win by lying, by cheating, by stealing. So Duryodhana's words, as he's dying there in the sand, bleeding to death, seem very true. You know, I die happy, where you inherit a kingdom of ashes and of lies. What do you have left? Nothing. Whereas Karna, Duryodhana, well, maybe or maybe not, but they're arguing that they have maintained their purity of soul. Karna certainly seems like he has. Now Duryodhana, well, he's done all kinds of bad things also. But nevertheless, he makes the point that the Pandavas have lied, cheated. They're defending Dharma, so to speak, but are they really? Are they just defending their honor? Is it just a brawl where nobody looks good and everybody ends up becoming evil? Is that what war does to us? Is that what struggle does to us? I mean, we talk about war and things like that, but we're all of us are subject to disagreement, conflict, argument. If you're not living with those things, well, you're not living at all. They are intrinsic in this life. And while most of us don't go around, invoking Armageddon and casting spells which destroy the world, most of us do argue, have conflict, even if it's just internal. Even if it's just your belly hurts because of something, something someone said or something you said or some thought you had, even if it's just a thought. Remember, in the Indian myth world, thought is itself an action. Well, not the Indian myth world. In the Indian cultural way of looking at the world, thought is an action. So our thoughts can be aggressive. Our thoughts can be, angry. Our thoughts can be peaceful. Our thoughts can be generous. So these are things this story raises in me. These are questions this story raises for me. And of course, it's in the headlines. It's in the Ukraine. It's in our streets and our cities in America, where I live, perhaps where you live as well. These conflicts, which are outer and are also inner. How do we succeed? How do we remain true? How do we do what is right? How do we do what is right? And here in this story, we have God, Krishna, telling the Pandavas to break the rules. Now, what does that mean? I mean, you could say that Krishna sees a larger picture. That as a God, he sees beyond the realm of humanity. And these little distinctions we draw between good and evil, the rules of war, the rules not of war, he sees beyond them. I think that's a valid point of view, and it's worth thinking about. He sees something larger than these human distinctions we make between good and evil. I have fought terrible powers, he says. I have saved what I've been able to save. I have fought terrible powers. I have saved what I've been able to save. You look around at the world now. You can name the emergency. Climate change, the big one. So much is going to be erased, it seems, in the next 500 years. So much is going to be lost. So much is lost day by day in suffering, in lives snuffed out in this world. I've fought terrible powers. I've saved what I've been able to save. Well, perhaps that's what we can hope for. Perhaps that's what our goal should be. And this story contemplates the end of everything. When Pashupata is invoked by Ashwataman and by Arjuna. Interesting too, Arjuna can call it back, whereas Ashwataman cannot. Part of the skill in deploying any weapon is knowing how to call it back, knowing how to sheath the sword, knowing how to unleash this power and then to call it back. That is true mastery of any power. To remain silent, perhaps, if you're a musician. To remain silent, perhaps, if you're a storyteller, a speaker of words. To fight and not to fight. That is also part of knowing any skill. Beautiful how that is just right there, woven into this story. And then following that, we get this horrible act by Ashwataman, where he diverts the weapon, this world-destroying weapon, to the wombs of all the women of the Pandava kingdom. Horrible. So there will be no children. So again, we see the amazing, merciless ability of this story and of the culture it comes from to imagine apocalypse. So we can imagine the end of the earth, as in everything becomes ash and darkness, which we saw more specifically way earlier in this epic in the story of Markandeya. Just a little footnote there. But also another kind of apocalypse, which is to have no children. Like this is, there's going to be no future at all for your people, for your culture, for your kingdom. Horrible. But an amazing example of the imaginative capacities of this story. And there is more to this particular incident. This isn't the last word, so I will just say stay tuned on that one. And then right before that, Ashwataman seeks refuge, so it seems, with Vyasa, the one who is telling this story. This whole story is in the mouth of Vyasa, this seer, this man with an oceanic mind, as he is called in the text, in the original. And this moment I've expanded on a little bit by combining it, just if you're curious to look under the scaffolding. There's a version of the Mahabharata where Ashwataman is hiding behind Vyasa, and the Pandavas go to find him, and he's hiding behind Vyasa, the storyteller. So I liked that moment, and I wanted to expand on it. Also, I threw in, there's another moment in this story, which I skipped earlier, when they're in the forest, where the Pandavas are in the forest, and Duryodhana and his brothers decide to go hunting and actually kill them in the forest. And they're only stopped by Vyasa, the storyteller, who just stops them. He just shows up. He pops up, and he speaks to Duryodhana, Dushasana, etc., and he says, stop, no violence is going to defile this part of my poem. Though there's plenty of violence at other places. In this moment, in the jungle, in the forest, he says, stop, you're not going to do this. You're not going to defile my poem with just killing them outright. And Duryodhana and his brothers turn around and go home. So that's a beautiful, strange, funny moment. So inspired by that, and also inspired by another quote from the poem, which is, everything that is found in the Mahabharata. What is not found in the Mahabharata is nowhere. Or to put it another way, it's true, everything in the Mahabharata is somewhere else. But whatever is not in the Mahabharata is nowhere. It's a poem which includes all of life. That's what epic aspires to do. That's what this poem aspires to do. And you're getting, remember, from me, a condensed version. No one could tell the whole thing. No one does tell the whole thing straight through. People tell stories from it. So this is just to say, in that moment with Ashwataman seeking refuge with Vyasa, I have combined several different moments in this story, and of course added my own stuff as well. A strange, beautiful moment. Is there a way out of this poem, he says. And Vyasa, no, there's no way out of this poem. There's no exit from this poem. Because this poem is all around us. It is this summer day on which I tell you this story. It is this house I'm in. It is wherever you are listening to this. Car, house, headphones, earbuds, wherever it is. Is that really true? Is all of life in this poem, in this story? Possibly so. And then finally we get Kunti, revealing at last, Gosh, for gosh sakes, finally revealing that Karna is the brother of the other Pandavas. Why has she waited so long? How deep is this shame she feels? Is it something where you just start and you can't stop? I know I've been in situations like that, I suppose, either with lies or just things you do. Then you start and you can't stop, whether it's eating ice cream or something else, But she, for whatever reason, maintained this silence for so long. And finally she lets it out. And what is there left to do but grieve, suffering, sorrow, weeping, and wailing? May our lives be free of that, though they can't quite be. But may that suffering be, well, nourishing if it comes, when it comes. Difficult thing to contemplate. Thank you for listening to this story. There is more after this. This is not the end. And that's a beautiful thing. If you are able to support this podcast, please do so. A great way to do that is through Patreon. I have a Patreon site, and that is very helpful to me, so I can do projects like this. I go to schools all the time. I tell stories, which is a beautiful thing. But the audience for this lengthy epic is not always easy to find, around the corner tomorrow. So the supporting this work through Patreon is very helpful to me to keep this going. Because servers and all that stuff costs money, and I had to pay all the extras in this particular scene. There were so many soldiers to pay and so many horses. I had to hire the elephants for this story. Oh my gosh. The special effects budget is off the scale, I'm telling you, for this kind of thing. Sleeping Beauty, not so bad. You just got a bunch of roses around a castle, some wise women who do some crazy stuff. But this one, I'm telling you, a cast of thousands, elephants, special effects budget, just crazy. The CGI on this story, it's nuts. Anyway, ha ha ha. Thank you for joining me. May this story live in you well. May it nourish you as it has nourished me. Take care.